Society. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy days for this webinar on mindfulness for care partners. I hope you find it useful. I'm Tricia Wallace. I'm one of the counselors here at Parkinson Society BC. I had noted a little earlier that if you don't have a pen, pencil, or paper handy, I'm going to request that you get one, just so that you can jot some things down. I'm going to ask you to jot some things down along the way. We have about an hour. Most of this mindfulness webinar will be looking at the screens and also doing some work together, some practice. And then at the end, I'm going to put the video camera on and we can have a question period. So I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till the end of this session, if at all possible. So the goals for this session are 5 goals. You can see them on the screen there. My main aim is to address how mindfulness can support you in your role as a care partner. I encourage you to either start mindfulness practice or to enhance the practice that you already engage in. So let's start with a question. On a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being no stress and 10 being extreme stress, where do you place yourself currently on that scale from 0 to 10? Now, while you're doing that, I'm just going to double check if everyone can hear me. It looks like there's some comments saying they can't hear me. Okay. Oh, great. Okay. All right. I want you to hold that number. Just hold on to that number and remember it. We're going to go back to that. Okay. All right. So let's situate mindfulness in the context of self-care for care partners. Consider the common statement, you can't pour from an empty cup. Many issues get in the way of filling our cups. Some of us have forgotten our cups altogether. That's not unusual with caregiving. There's a lot out there about self-care, and it often involves advice about taking time for yourself, setting boundaries, and letting others help with the caregiving process. These moves make sense. However, what I hear from care partners is that it's very challenging to make that emotional space, to create boundaries, because of the conflicts involved in being compassionate. How do we understand and value our personal needs for freedom or comfort or self-fulfillment, for example, when quite literally someone's life depends on us, often 24/7? It can feel like our needs get eclipsed by the vulnerability of our loved ones. Mindfulness approaches to the moment, focusing on the moment, helps us to find out what we are feeling and what we need. Those insights inform self-care. We do not remember the days, we remember the moments. What resonates with us emotionally in one moment can impact the day, the week, and onward. There's a possibility to carry with us the collective impact of our emotions over time. This happens because our brains are association machines, connecting experiences with thoughts and emotions. That's why we can sometimes feel overwhelmed or angry with what is seemingly a small thing to others who are watching. A gesture or event becomes symbolic of something larger in our minds. Have any of you had feedback from others suggesting you've overreacted to an event? A spill, for example, or a missed fall. If you have, this is a normal human experience when we are all under stress. What this insight offers us is the opportunity to isolate the current moment from those that have happened in the past and those that might happen in the future. This does not mean that we ignore patterns and trends, but it does mean that we give ourselves the space to observe the moment, to take it in as though we are evaluating it, in contrast to being enveloped by it. A focus on the moment with this sense of space can help us feel like we have choices. We then can respond in contrast to reacting. So that's what mindfulness really can do for us. And so let's look at what mindfulness is in general. This will be a review for some people, but it's always interesting to return to some introduction and some introductory ideas. So John Kabat-Zinn is a well-known mindfulness researcher and practitioner. And he talks about mindfulness as paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment and looking at the unfolding of our experiences moment by moment. Mindfulness refers to particular qualities of attention and awareness that can be cultivated and developed through meditation. But there are also other ways to explore being mindful. The mindful approach is receptive. When mindful, we are less likely to suppress or deny experiences like suffering, like pain, like fear, not only in ourselves, but in those we care about. Mindfulness is not about escaping or fixing anything. It's an invitation to allow yourself to be where you are already, knowing what's happening inside while evaluating what's happening outside. Mindfulness can help us be observers, but that does not mean that we become passive when mindful. The latter one is really important. Just as the vulnerable people you look after are not docile, they don't do everything you want just the way you want it. The mindful care partner does not have to be passive, does not have to let things happen without having any say in what's going on. So in general, being mindful involves turning down the patterns of thinking and responses that draw energy away from the moment, which is the only true place that we can act to make a positive change in our lives. If we think about reviewing and turning back or thinking back, our brains are trying to work out scenarios to involve and solve life problems. We need to do this, but with a balance, to take away what we learned rather than being stuck in a process of judgment and putting ourselves down. And thinking ahead, it's important to plan, but we have to realize that we can't design plans to control the outcome of events. Our minds can work overtime to run through events as though we can read the future. We don't have crystal balls. This can stem from us feeling like we are responsible for everything. Our feelings, the feelings of others, our safety, the safety of others, etc. The care partner role puts this experience into overdrive. A mindful space, balanced in the middle, is one that is anchored in the moment, often with a breath, an object, or a sound. Here's a bell as a sound. So let's look a little bit about the science of mindfulness, just a little bit. There are many measures now about the responses to mindfulness and the benefits of it. And I bring them up mostly to talk about how activities can help us overall with stress. These studies on mindfulness focus on the way that mindfulness can mitigate or modulate the body's response to stress. These involve exploring brain activity. So this would be the central nervous system here, which is the brain, and the spinal cord here. Now that's partly inner awareness, and it's partly automatic, which we call the autonomic system or autonomic processes. And its effects are mostly measured on two branches of the peripheral nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. One is about fighting and flighting and going and reacting and responding, and the other is about resting and digesting. There's also a freeze response that is often attributed to the sympathetic nervous system, but actually finds its place being turned on by both the sympathetic nervous system and an overdrive process and a protective process that happens with the parasympathetic nervous system. Overall, we want to turn down the reaction of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-flight. And we want to allow the parasympathetic nervous system to turn up in order to find that space where we feel safe and unburdened from challenging emotions and worrisome thoughts. This is the place where we do something when we're doing, quote unquote, nothing. There are markers for the benefits of mindfulness, such as cortisol, which is released with stress, heart rate, blood pressure, and brain activity. There's often changes in less brain activity seen in areas associated with stress. The amygdala are big ones that take in sensory information, for example, and many other areas. Research on mindfulness has identified these benefits: reduced rumination, stress reduction, and fewer reports of body discomfort, improved working memory, better focus and performance on tasks, less emotional reactivity, more cognitive flexibility because of opening up alternative pathways of thinking besides those related to the threat or the stress. Relationship satisfaction also goes up because they think partly because of the less emotional reactivity, of course. And improved sleep often occurs with mindfulness practice. So I'm going to draw this down now to what happens with a typical rise and fall of our emotions. And I learned this many, many years ago as anger or anxiety mountain, and I think it's quite a useful visual for us. What typically happens is that we need a little bit of anxiety to get us focused and interested as humans. And along this pathway, we have the ability to reflect, we can listen, we can vent, we can talk about what's going on, and we can share what's going on with us quite often. And even when we get to this point, if there's a stressor that comes on, our sympathetic nervous system might start to rev up as it should naturally, and then we might become even more focused and pay more attention as we might need to. But in this process, as we start to move up this mountain, we often will, actually most humans, stop the ability to be able to reflect, and they can't think in a flexible, reflective way. They can still vent and talk and yell and have expression, but they don't necessarily take in what other people are saying. And then we can get to the point at the top of this mountain where we're overwhelmed. We're not able to hear other people. We're not able to reflect. And then over time, of course, this looks different for everybody, But in time, the emotions start to cool off. And in this part of the mountain is a refractory or regrouping time when we take time to think about what happened, and we start to often become more flexible again as emotions cool off, and we can start this rest and digest kind of process that goes on in our bodies. So this is what happens with most stressors. We kind of go up and then we go down. In Western society, they say most of us don't ever go down to the baseline again, but we do definitely have a very distinct up and down movement. I made this as a Carepartner mountain range because I think it's important to look at. So let's say if we follow our thoughts and feelings, like fear and anger, and that often happens on the other side as we're coming down, or it could be that we're noticing and really attentive to the alarms that are going off at the beginning on the way up this mountain. We tend to really ignite and reignite our alarm system in our body. Oh no, what happened? Oh, that happened again. I just finished cleaning that up. Oh, I can't believe it. We're upset. And maybe we don't even have time to think here because something else happens. And then again, there's a climb up that mountain with even more anxiety and feelings, and then maybe an expression of something that happens here that we're sarcastic or yelling, and then we think about it a little bit more, and then we feel remorse and we feel embarrassed, we feel upset. How could we have said that? Why did we say that? And then again, another thing happens. There's hardly any time to regroup, and then another thing happens, and so on. And there could be a sense with all of this serial collective stress that happens, that there might be a sense like, oh, this is hopeless. What I'm doing isn't working. So that is something that is quite commonly talked about with the care partnering process. So I'd like to focus work on mindfulness, thinking about this mountain. Again, knowing that at the beginning of this mountain, we're able to talk about feelings more and we're able to get them out. It's important to find a way to be able to express what's going on with ourselves and to talk about I statements and other things that really help you to express your needs and what you want. And there's different ways that another lecture or another discussion we can have about those. And another thing is on the way up, looking at these triggers, to be able to cue into our triggers a little bit earlier. And being mindful helps us to do that, because part of mindfulness is kind of tuning into the body and finding out what's happening in my body. What am I sensing? And what are my emotions right now? What am I feeling? So we give ourselves the space to be able to explore that with mindfulness. This is about listening to our alarm bells. And then if we end up at the top of, anxiety, anger mountain, which every human has and every human does, we got to be kind to ourselves, because it's really hard to stop emotional responses at this time. We might be able to control our behavior better, but it's very hard to just shut off and control our emotions. And then as things cool off, this is a time again when mindfulness becomes very useful, to reflect on experiences and responses. What worked? What didn't work? What do I want to do differently? What do I need from this process? And it's really important at this point to move away from judging ourselves and judging what's going on as being good, bad, I should have, I couldn't, I didn't. All of that stuff we tend to want to set aside with a mindful approach. So if we look at this description of mindfulness, I'd like you each to write a few lines about your path. What are you using on your path to mindfulness? There's some cues in this picture. There's things that are going on there's activities in this picture. So one thing might be, how could we make a bath seem like a more mindful process? Or looking at walking outside, spending time in nature. How is that part of your path on being mindful? Another thing people ask me is, how do you know when you get there? Like, is there a there for mindfulness? And that's a good question, isn't it? Because often I'm curious to know if people have any feedback about that as well. If you want to kind of throw that up there for a minute, just for a little bit of a share on the chat. And another thing people ask me is, am I doing this right? And that's part of that experience of tuning into what is an internal experience and what changes inside and what changes outside. What do you notice outside? Mindfulness often allows us to be able to tune into what's happening inside a little bit more. And guess what? That might mean feeling anxious. It might mean feeling uncomfortable. Doesn't always mean mindfulness is causing that discomfort. Sometimes it means that we're actually paying attention to ourselves in a different way. And also things outside of us might seem a little bit different. We might notice things that we didn't notice before. Aha. Someone's noticing about having a dog to walk, getting a chance to go outside, walking a dog, yes. So finding those places where you can be mindful and what that might look like is all part of this mindful process. I'm just going to move on here. So let's try a 10-minute mindfulness exercise. I've got a picture of an anchor here because we want to use an anchor to the moment. And before we practice this anchor, I'm going to use the breath for today, but there are different ways to anchor, as we talked about a sound, an image, a vision, holding something a little bit heavy, like a bean bag or some smooth rock or something, can also be an anchor. We're going to use our senses first to ground. So before we start a mindfulness process, we want to sort of move into a place where we feel grounded, because often we're quite in our heads when we're feeling stressed. So I suggest you sit with the intention to be alert with an upright posture while you're still remaining comfortable. Your eyes can be open or closed. If your eyes are open, you can focus on an object, usually about 3 feet in front of you if possible, not too high, so you don't have to cock your head up too high. Let's pay attention to the ground, noticing its stillness. Noticing how the earth below us supports us. Pay attention to your feet and notice areas of connection. Do you notice any areas of pressure and sensation with your feet connected to the earth? Notice your body's connection with the chair, your legs, your hip, your back, both hips, not just one, your hips and your back. Notice that the chair is then supported by the ground. Recognize the location of your arms. Encourage them to fall from your shoulders as though they're hanging like drapes. How are your arms resting? Are they on your legs or perhaps on the arms of your chair? Sense into the way that they connect with your body or the chair. Let's pay attention to the breath. Don't try to change the depth or the rhythms of your breath right now. Just notice it. You might feel a cool sensation of the breath on your nostrils. Sense the flow of the breath. Where does it flow? What is its rhythm? If you feel caught up with tension around your breath, that's okay. Go back to the feelings like coolness on your nose. Or sense into the movement of your chest, rising and falling, your belly moving with the air. You can also focus on your exhale instead of your inhale. Now let's take a few breaths. And this time we'll try and breathe together on a count. We want the breath in to be at a count and the exhale to be a little bit longer than the inhale. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll repeat this for 3 cycles. In, 1, 2, 3, and out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now breathe on your own. Your counts can be longer or shorter. Stay comfortable. Let's resume our own breath patterns and pay attention to the moment. Be aware of thoughts that come into the mind, as they inevitably will. Instead of shutting off thoughts or pushing them away, acknowledge them, and then pay attention to your breath again. A thought can have the response, busy mind, a ringing in the ears, or a ticking of a clock, ringing, ticking. Emotions can be named. Fear. Keep on moving back and forth to the breath, allowing a thought in, noticing it, and then returning to the breath. This is how the breath becomes an anchor to the moment. Now let's explore our other senses while grounded, using our breaths. When we are on an anger or anxiety mountain, there starts to be a limit to the senses we feel beyond the alarms response. We get focused on that. We are now drawing attention to the whole body's experiences in the moment. Pay attention again to your feet, legs, hips, and arms, sensing their connection to the ground. Using the breath to settle in with the idea of softening the muscles in our bodies. Ask yourself, what's happening in my body? Is there tension, relaxation, pain, comfort? What do I sense? Cool, warmth, brightness, dark? Any scents? Any sounds? What emotions am I feeling right now? Name an emotion or discover an experience that does not have an identifying name yet. We'll sit with this. And we can accept that we feel, but we don't need to have all the answers right now. We are just noticing. You might imagine each breath bringing in brightness and energy, while each exhale allows us to give away what we don't need. We can use our breaths to move the tensions, pain, and discomfort, letting them leave the body with our exhale. There's a softening brought in with each breath. Starting with the top of the head, the forehead, temples, eyes, cheeks, and jaw, all soften. With the breath, the back of the head, neck, shoulders, and collarbones, all soften. The length of the spine, the rib cage, the mid and lower back, all soften. The belly, upper and lower, softens, rising and falling with a couple of deep breaths. The hips and legs, upper and lower, soften. The ankles and feet, soften. We can feel the ground under our feet. We breathe and pay attention to the moment. Our bodies are in the moment, safe and grounded. Let's take in a sense of how we feel right now, and let some of its benefits move with us through the day and into the evening, bringing lightness and positive energy that we use as a resource at this time. When you feel ready, open your eyes if they were closed and wiggle your fingers and toes, and we're going to shift into the busy world again. I hope everyone can hear me. It sounds like there are some challenges there for folks. Okay, so what is your level of stress right now? If you could use that scale that we talked about at the beginning. Do you notice any changes? And you could note to yourself what you do notice. You might not notice anything at all that's changed. Just get a sense of what that might be like for you. We've got some people sharing some typing. Aha! Lightness and relaxation. Yeah. Did anyone notice that time sort of was hard to figure out time passing? Could be a short time passing or feel like time kind of disappeared for a bit. That happens. And it really is amazing how just 5 or 10 minutes can seem like a lot longer. When we think about our brains that work so fast, if we give ourselves even a breath, that is like a really long time to slow the brain down. So imagine then if we give ourselves 5 or 10 minutes, half an hour. Yeah, yeah. So some feedback about some changes. Yeah. So let's move on to barriers a little bit. I know with my mindful practice, it's like when things get super stressful, that's when I stop doing it. And really, that's the time we really, really need to do it. So here are some, experience, of course, I've had, and many people share these sorts of challenges. I want you to think about a barrier as well. If you write down maybe one or two of your biggest barriers to mindfulness, what was that? What was that like? What are the barriers that you notice? So let's look at how we can kind of manage some barriers by starting with when we kind of need to be motivated and really turn up the interest in mindfulness. So the cues for our need to be mindful are many, and what we're really kind of cueing into is system overload. What happens with care partners often is it the system overload becomes normalized. It becomes normal. And that can be a challenge because then we're really not paying attention to what's going on in our bodies. And that's a natural response with the alert and the alarm systems in our bodies. So what we're trying to do is to cue in again to what is overload for us. And that can be emotional if we notice changes, more sadness, fear, guilt, a sense of hopelessness. Actions and behaviors as well, yelling or being sarcastic or saying mean things when we're feeling really bad. These things happen. They just do in overload. Also, hiding away or running away with a feeling that we need to escape. That's another sign. And of course, issues with rest and sleep, changes in the ability to rest and sleep. What the body's doing with this overload and these cues is it's kind of like tugging on our pant leg. Imagine someone tugging on our pant leg saying, hey, it's me, I'm over here, I'm over here. Don't forget, I'm overloaded. Our body is cueing us into these different issues that we need to pay attention to. So for structured practice, we might consider, mindful meditations, formal meditations, yogic, Zen-like meditations. But we got to really find something that works for you. So that can include processes of visualization, mindful walking. There's internal martial arts, for example, Bagua, Qigong, Tai Chi, and other movement-related mindfulness that can occur using music as a mindfulness-based work. Guided recordings, of course, there are so many out there, and we'd be happy to help you with some. And maybe what I'll do is I'll send out a list of some guided recordings that you might be able to explore for your home use. Using a symbol can be helpful. A mantra can be helpful. So something that you go return to a discussion or a mantra that you're using, a line that you like to use. So for mine, I take a breath and I say patience. I say patience when I start to put myself down. I'm trying to be patient with myself. So what kind of mantra might you use? Make the space as well. When you say you are doing your mindful practice, make sure you make that space and say, I'm not available until this is done. And to join with others or be on your own, see what works best for you. And uh, just find a space that you can really make your own, whatever that might look like for you. And there's also a way to integrate mindfulness into our daily lives. So what I hear from people is a lot is, I can be mindful in my yoga class or my Tai Chi, whatever they're doing. They feel so great when they do their practices. And then they leave the area that they've been practicing in, and the mindfulness sort of dissipates. And they're, I can't bring this attitude and this approach into my daily life. So, of course, what we know is the more we do things, the more they become rote, the more they become automatic. Remember, our brains are association machines as well. So we want to use our body's senses and the associations that our brain uses to bring mindfulness into our lives. So there's something called a doorknob exercise. Now, I'm going to recommend you do this with a doorknob moving outward. So not one where if you're standing at a door, someone's going to open the door onto you. But we encounter a lot of doorknobs every day, and we can think of doors themselves as a threshold between one moment and the next. So we're reframing something we don't think about very much. A door is a threshold between one moment and the next. And before we just automatically open a door, stop, take a minute. And with this current climate, we're going to have to use either gloves and get some alcohol wipes before we touch the door. But we're going to then open the door after that breath. That allows for a few moments every day. Brushing our teeth. Slow down. Brushing teeth. Notice. And someone's saying counting backwards is very helpful. Yes, yes. And notice brushing your teeth. Notice the sensations. Slow down everyday activities like eating. Has anyone done the raisin exercise here? That's something you can look up on the internet and see if you could try that. Use aromas in meditation. So use sense, your sensory. That's part of that autonomic nervous system that we're drawing on. And I don't know if anyone's been in a yoga class and they spray that lovely peppermint, and then every time you go outside of the class and you smell that peppermint, what happens? Quite often our bodies just automatically kind of soften. We're reminded of that experience. Car meditation, obviously not while driving, but driving people to and from appointments, driving yourself to and from the store. Hop in the car if it's warm enough, and don't turn on the car right away. Take a breath first. Waiting room meditations as well. Take the time in a waiting room to do some meditation if you can. And do this situation where if you're really under a lot of stress, ask yourself, where are my feet? So that's part of a grounding process. Where are my feet? Another one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is like a quick grounding process. And we're using our senses for this as well. For example, I can just quickly run you through it here, but it won't be as long as it usually is. But look around the room and find 5 things that are rectangular. Now find 4 things that are brown. Notice 3 sounds. Recognize 2 sensations. And name 1 emotion. So that's what 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is. And I can send that out, the little script for that. You can switch things up. What that's doing is it's putting our evaluation attitude up there. We're just looking. We're not saying, oh, that's a nice picture, or, oh, the sun's too bright. We're not doing that. We're not judging. We're just noticing things. And that kind of puts us in a mode of being grounded in the moment without judgment. So all in all, mindfulness can help care partners. It can help everybody, right? It helps us reset. It helps us reflect and reconsider in a way that offers a little bit more space, a little few more options that are not clouded by intense emotions that we all feel as humans. It can help improve the quality of our lives. It can help us be more healthy. It can help us be more resilient. So let's return to that concept of filling our cups. What do you imagine for yourself? Can mindfulness help you fill your cup? When we finish here, you may consider how to make a plan to either start or deepen your mindfulness practice. Start with finding a time of day, the duration, 5 minutes, as I said, is enough. And find a place and a format that works for you. Be kind to yourself and know that mindfulness practices don't always bring relaxation, but each attempt helps us find a sense of balance. And Parkinson Society BC can help you as well. We can support you with your plans for mindful practice. You can connect with us for resources. You can consider our free counseling or just a 1 or 2 time consultation for mindfulness. And we also have an 8-week online mindfulness workshop series, and that's starting on March 23rd with my colleague, Judy Zhu. So thanks very much for your attention and to be part of this process. I really appreciate you taking your time. And I'm going to open this up. I'm going to turn my video on now, and I'm going to open this up and to some video commentary and connection. And I'd also like, oh, thanks for doing that, Amy. And I want to leave you with Dalai Lama's, what Dalai Lama said. There are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. One is called yesterday, and the other is called tomorrow. So today is the right day to love, believe, do, and mostly live. Here goes my camera, and I'll entertain some questions if anyone has any. How are we doing here? Hello there. You can type the questions in, or you can just ask them. If anyone has anything to share about their ideas or plans or a mindful practice that you find is interesting, that's also helpful. Alana, you can find the dates and times of the mindfulness workshop and the link that is right above you in the chat and also online in Parkinson Society BC on our website. Great. Oh, I'm not sharing. Hello. I thought I was on video, but I wasn't. Thank you, Amy, for running into my office and turning on my video. Oh, I'm glad there was some learning for people. I don't know if anyone else, I guess no one has their audio open, probably because there's so many attendees, we might not be able to do that. Not sure. Lots of people typing. I don't know, Amy, if we can open this up for chatting, or maybe not, for people to say things out loud.
We can try. Folks, if you would like to use your voice to chat, at the top of the screen there, you'll see a purple bar, and the icon on the right is a little kind of stick person with their hand up. If you click on that, you'll raise your hand, and from there we can enable people's microphones individually. Maybe we can try it that way.
Okay. The more time you take to be mindful, the better caregiver you can be. Yeah, yeah. And that resetting, eh? Finding ways for resetting during the day. What would that look like for you? Yes, and then progressive muscle relaxation is very effective, isn't it? It's something that is a staple of a mindfulness-based practice, and that can often be very good. You can look that up or join a group that is doing that. And it allows people to be able to sort of pay attention to the body with tension and then relax and moving through the systems of the body to do that. So it's really comes down to time, doesn't it? Is it possible for you to do these things? Where do you find the time to be able to do mindfulness-based stuff? And that is a question. Sometimes, like I said, just adding it in. If you really don't find a time to make that space, add it in for 5 minutes at a time, or just a whole bunch of little moments at which you are mindful. Those add up in the day. You do that 10 times a day. Those add up. The body registers that even if the consciousness doesn't register it. The the peripheral nervous system and the autonomic nervous system will likely have some benefits from that. Haha, so we've got a recommendation for an app, Breathe, for wonderful 5-minute, yeah, relaxation exercises. Yeah. So to be able to reset really helps us from going up and down that anger mountain, to be able to cap it, and we don't maybe what the option is hopefully is to be able to get to a point where you're not at the top of the mountain. We can catch ourselves as we're cueing in, uh-oh, and then to be able to not get to the top of the mountain. So to be able to get to the point where we're still venting and we're still feeling tension and upset, but we're not getting to the point where we can't think anymore and we can't listen to what's going on. Hmm. Yeah, there's some great apps. What I can do is we have a list of your emails if you chose to put your emails in, and we can send you a list that I do send clients. And this list has just a number of different apps. Where you have to be careful with the apps is that they will give you free stuff, and then they are going to try and ask you to get the premium one. So you don't need to get the premium one to be order to use some of the basic of elements of their product that they have. You may also consider that I have a link. It's actually through Children's Hospital. Dr. Vo is an expert on mindfulness, and he has MP3s that are free, and he has a number of them that are quite simple, really stripped down, very helpful for people. So I often give that as a mindfulness option for people. Yeah, Marilyn, I understand what you're saying. Coping with the coronavirus anxiety. All the things we are bombarded in our lives with so much information, so many worries. We're not just worrying about what's happening in our lives, in our houses. We're kind of taking on the sensory experiences of the whole world. And so I do think it's important sometimes to take a break from that. And that could be a mindful activity. No news today, for example. Oh boy. I'm sorry. People's worlds are really being turned upside down, aren't they? Oh, Caroline, it's VO, V-O. And you can look under Kelty Mental Health, Dr. Vo Mindfulness. Oh, thanks, Amy, for doing that. Yeah. Yeah, they're really helpful and they're free, and there's a variety of them. Just going to take a drink of water. My cup is partly full. Okay. Well, I'm not hearing anyone else. And I'm wondering if it is time to finish up. If anyone has any other questions, you're welcome to email them to us, or we can support you on a start. Look at your lists for your barriers. Look at what opportunities you might have. Scan the internet. Listen to some different people doing mindfulness and see what might work for you. Hmm. I'm just looking downward at the printing here. Again, many thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Tricia, for taking the time to put this all together and for being our presenter this morning. I've included our contact information in the chat box there, so if you have any questions or you would like to get in touch with either myself or Tricia, please feel free to reach out. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye now.